What is education, and why is education important? Is it important? After all, what's the real purpose of getting educated about anything? We so frequently take education and the process for learning in general totally for granted. Not only that, but the ways in which we think. How we've gone about structuring our own consciousness itself has largely remained unchanged for a long, long time. So how do we literally change our minds? Can we reconfigure our own ways of thinking? And if so, how? Join Dr. Joseph Atman, the founder of one of the world's most revolutionary educational centers, Middletree, and award-winning broadcaster Tammy Trujillo for Educate Everyone, and explore the mysteries of our own consciousness and the education we implement in order for it to be what it is.
This week on Educate Everyone, our conversation continues with Gina Lee. She's an independent college counselor helping U.S. and international students find best fit colleges. A former director of college counseling, she guides students to craft authentic stories and pursue their goals with confidence. Now here's Gina Lee and Dr. Atman.
So much of what education should be about is not being looked at or given its due. You want a well-rounded student. You want a well-rounded human out there in the world, with that well-roundedness hopefully coming from some sort of integration between the general ethics and the morals and those values that are instilled. And I think that starts, generally speaking, at home, but there should be some intertwining of that within the education system that, from what I've gathered doing this for the last couple of decades now, is that those kinds of things are just not talked about and are often actually even taboo within the educational system at primary and secondary levels. So there's not much of a compass for students to go off of so far as those things are concerned. And like you said earlier, they're too busy anyways trying to keep up with all the requirements that are impressed upon them from that weighty sort of base that the education system just demands. So there's a lot to unpack. And I don't know that it's navigable given the way that we do education from A to Z, really. Once you get to college, you mentioned you're still worried about some students because they still have to get that grade and succeed in that particular environment. So again, you're kind of in this position of placing them in the best position for them to succeed. And I think that's, as parents, as guardians, as stewards, as educators, that's what we're always trying to do for our population, for the people under our stewardship. We're just trying to place them in the best possible situations. And yet, how can we possibly do that if the institutions or that world that we're giving them over to require something totally different of them? So there's got to be a balance in there somewhere, but I'm not sure that it can really find its level given the current way that we go about doing the business of education as we have traditionally for the last 100 or so years. So I don't know. But that's why primarily we're talking now.
There's that story where there's hundreds of starfish on the sand on a beach.
I know this
and someone says, well, they're all going to die.
Why are you doing that?
The person picks a starfish up and throws it in the sea and says, not that one. Not that one.
Yep.
Unfortunately, that's a position I feel like I'm in, where I am saying you can absolutely navigate this if you decide to. So I think for many times, like, I'm thinking about my student I had a conversation with just yesterday. I do this thing called academic storyboarding, where I start with the spark that a student has on a particular topic. And then that starts the why is this happening? What is happening? And then what if this other thing happens? And it's the start of intellectual curiosity of whys, and then how to problem solve, and then trying it and understanding what it takes to problem solve. So if you start with the genesis, that lends itself to something else. because you're trying solutions. Are you realizing in order for me to create a solution to this, I need to go learn that particular skill. So if it's storytelling, I need to learn how to podcast, or I need to learn how to do video. I need to know how to do Canva. I need to know how to do social media with SEO. So they have now a purpose to why they're doing something, because they want to continue to ask this question that's an issue that they are concerned about. So this journey, and I literally have them storyboard that. And as they storyboard that, you will find that they start to understand that the difference between you and Mrs. Lee or Joe is the in-between reasons of like your insights that you gained about yourself, the reflections you gained about what you enjoy, what you're really good at, where you want to go next to go grab things and learn things. So I feel like if we can get our students to do, maybe it's more project-based learning, for instance, to do these points of investigation where they're looking through this line of looking at wicked problems, these problems that they're really interested in, they care about, that's when they get turned on. And even that helps a lot because they look at their reasoning of why they want to do well at school. We only have X number of hours per day, right?
They find their purpose.
They find their purpose. And I feel like that's what we need to do is like we need to instill that sense of purpose that they matter. Because I have students who do advocacy and they see that their advocacy, for instance, I have a student that's doing hospice care and she was really upset because her grandfather did not get the things that he needed as hospice setter. And then she does research and she realizes it's not even them themselves, it's the system. So then she starts to look at other countries that are doing hospice. And then that leads to public policy changes that she wants to be a part of. That journey came because there's something personal that happened to her that was a problem. And that's what carried her all the way through her journey. And then in that process, she is taking these classes, those magnet schools where she's going to end up with probably 15 APs, but she's using the skill sets that she's gained through doing that much reading and writing and pumping things out, as well as her debate, all the skills that she's gained in debate to push that advocacy piece all the way through. So she's what I call turned on. She's got the spark and she's been turning on. And so she's very much ready for college. So I feel like it has to do with that beginning part, that spark, no matter what school system you're in. And that's what's missing. And you'll find that some students have it and it's evergreen. It's from the beginning of time. If you ask a student, what do you remember? It's usually that one teacher, you're right, in high school. Yep. Maybe if you look at your own high school experiences, that one teacher that really cared about them and turned something on and said, what do you care about? And do a lot of that. And that spark does something to the student. Just like that student I talked about from Las Vegas. She said, I was like that mall-going girl. I'd be going to the malls. If I wasn't at my school here, the boarding school, I would still be going to the malls every weekend and being a consumer, and that's it. But because I was in this school that said you mattered, that the things that you care about mattered, I felt like I could make a difference. And so I think that initial spark of making students feel that they matter and then having them try something and then seeing it in the world that even at the age of 14 or 15 that they can put stuff out there, whether it's Instagram or GitHub or whatever, that someone's picking that up truly turns them on. And I feel like that's what's missing. Can we do that on a institutional level where we're doing that for hundreds of kids? Is it scalable or thousands of kids? That's a big question, and maybe technology will be able to at some point.
Right. Well, but I think it's a question that educators need to start asking themselves, because what you just said about project-based learning, I think there's something to that, because what we've been doing traditionally now for the past 100+ years in the education system, and the traditional model is you sit down, you get taught by the teacher who teaches at you, right, talks to you, you regurgitate information. It's the whole kind of almost a subservient model. And that's okay. I mean, the subservience has its place, and adhering to a hierarchical structure has an importance of its own. But I think where things are getting lost, and I think more importantly and more dangerously for students and for the human consciousness in general, is an apathy that we are inbreeding within students within the education system. Is this model where, again, they're just sat down and they're just made to learn concepts and they're just made to study ideas. None of that gets out into praxis, though. So where you combine the idea with the thought and have it actually out there. And so that project-based model, or at least moving towards something that has more projects within them, something that have an aim, have a goal, have something that you find out along the way that you contribute to as a student. I think that's a model that educators might want to try and look at more. But again, can they do that within the confines of what the institution demands of them currently? So I don't know, but I think that's possibly a direction, and that way you could even have a model that much more resembles real life, where cooperation is more important frequently than competition. Competition is still needed, but you have this cooperative happening amongst the folks who you're doing this project with, or those who you're partnering with outside it, or you have a certain skill set that I don't, and we team up and do this thing. And then maybe we compete later on about something else, right? But it's living, it's organic. It's not this dead idea that teachers expound upon to their students and just say, this is the concept, this is the idea, regurgitate that information to me, on Tuesday at the test. Because obviously the phenomena that we encounter every day is alive. It's actionable. It's happening. It's organic. It's changing. The concepts that we're postulating to students are not. An idea itself, it's dead. It's something that's concretized. It's a thought. Here's the idea. And that's what it is. It's frozen in time, where you need to bring that idea to life. And that's, I don't think, what education does nearly enough of. Let's take this concretized, frozen statue of a thing, this idea, this concept, this notion, this thought, this whatever it might be, and now let's do something with it. Let's work with it. Let's animate it. Let's bring it back. Let's bring it forth. Let's bring it further. And again, that just doesn't happen. And right now, the model and the modus is within the education system. Here's the idea. Just know the idea. I don't want to hear your idea about it. Just here it is. Here's the concept. That's what it is. Test on Tuesday. I want to know that you know what the idea is. Don't care what you have to say about it, how you work with it, what you do with it. Just give it to me on a test.
Well, I think the economy is going to, it's already showing us that doesn't work, right? You have so many, for the first time in history, you have more college-educated kids that are unemployed than high school. The marketplace is saying that that's not what we want anymore. Mm-hmm. And so I think that we must change, and that's the exciting part, is that our hands are tied. We must change to survive. And just understanding that it is the fact that we have generative AI and agentic AI that's going to help students. We're in this funky phase where we were at first, you can't use AI to, we better start teaching everybody AI, whether we like it or not. Students are using it. Let's teach them how to use it. So we're in this really middle ground where we haven't figured it out completely, and our policies are evolving as educators. And so I feel like no matter what, our old guard or our old system is going to be obsolete because the marketplace is dictating it is obsolete. I have a conversation between my oldest and my youngest, and my youngest is now finishing up his first semester in college, and he said, I don't know if it's worth it. Like, I'm doing well. I'm getting the grades. I'm getting the grades. But he goes, Mom, do you really want to? It's like $99,000 a year. Is this worth what I want to do?
Which is insane, by the way. Which is insane. You could be a billionaire. Insane. That's an insane.
Yes, that's the just price crazy.
It's crazy. I mean, the price of anything doesn't matter how much money you make. Exactly. It should be reasonable. That's truly, truly insane.
I would have never said to my oldest son. I would have said, "You're finishing college." 10 years ago, I would have, or 12 years ago, I would have said, you're finishing college. Right, now it's like, you got a really good point. You have a very good point.
Sorry, remind everyone what you do for a living again, Gina? You saying that, right? You know what I mean? But that's the irony of the situation. And it doesn't mean that that's not for everybody. I mean, that college is a great space for so many people, and an important one, and a really important one.
It is.
Just like you said, even 10 years ago, this wasn't so much the conversation, but it really is now because of so many quickly evolving things within the way of the world just in general, right?
It is. We have this one saying in college admissions, it depends, right? It always depends. There's no one flat, yes, you must do this, or no, you must not do that. And so I would definitely say this is one of those things where you go, it depends. It depends on your goal. It depends on what you need to thrive, what you decide will make you happy.
But you have to know what that is as a person.
That's right.
You have to know yourself, right? You have to know what your aim is. And we don't teach that to people. So, yeah.
No. So I'm going to go completely full circle, Joe. It comes down to reflection. I have found that reflection is everything. Teaching students how to reflect, how to pause and say, what is my goal? What do I want to gain? Am I going to be happy here? Am I going to make excuses that I didn't do X, Y, and Z? And if I didn't do X, Y, and Z, is it because I'm leaning into my weaknesses, or can I leverage my strengths and go forward? Right? But that requires a student as young as, I think, even 14 years old. Studies say that by 14 years old, you kind of know what your natural talents are. Your interests might evolve and your hobbies may evolve. What you are naturally good at, you probably know when you're 14. If you're naturally great at talking to people, making people feel comfortable around you, or if you're a natural connector because you're always going, hey, I want you to meet my friend with this friend, you're a connector. If you know that you are naturally someone that can go really deep and get totally lost because you are writing a story, or you're decoding something, or you're building something artistic, then you're more of a maven. Maybe you're always trying to persuade people and get your mom to buy you something, or get your friend to go do something because you're persuasive. Then you're more of a pitch person. So those kinds of characteristics, as well as your talents. I'm really good with numbers. My husband will tell you that I'm not great with spatial planning. He's brilliant. I am not. To try to take my weakness and make it stronger would be ludicrous. It would be a waste of my time and energy. So those things I knew before I was 14, I knew that about myself. So those are things that if students can just hone in on, what are they good at? What do they want to do? What gets them excited? Those are moments of reflection. I think that starts really a lifelong process of being able to pivot and redirect and learn throughout your lifetime, no matter what the circumstances or the marketplace is doing, right? So if you no longer can have these 2-year management courses as an undergraduate, you graduate and they used to have these big companies train you into the job. That is no longer true anymore. These companies don't do it. They can't afford it. They expect you to come on first day and run pretty much. So you can shift by doing the training or the learning yourself, or networking to gain that skill. So I feel like if you know yourself, if you know your strengths, you know your passions, you know sort of the things that you need to get in terms of skill sets to get to the next level, you're so much ahead of the game, whether you go to college or not. I work with students that want to go to college for various different reasons, and I would say that if they can reflect on who they are and then talk about who they are, they're going to do well, no matter the circumstances.
And I think it's an important exercise to do even throughout your life. Absolutely. What are your aims? What are your goals? What problems do you want to solve? Much like we were talking about, the institution requires so much of students that they don't have time to reflect. I think that's true of us as adults as well. We're always trying to do what we need to do to put food on the table, to pay the bills, to just get through day to day. We don't spend enough time, and this is something I think we all need to do far more regularly than we likely do currently, is we need to reflect. We need to ask ourselves, what is my life about? What is it about currently? What do I want it to be about? If you ask yourself questions, if you literally talk to yourself about it, I frequently, as folks know, I start recording my own thoughts, and I've got them probably unwisely up on the internet just in raw form. They're more philosophical and academic pieces, but having some space where you can reflect, where you can talk to yourself or talk to somebody, your partner, a therapist, anybody, about your own life. I think it would be monumentally helpful for all of us. And it needs to happen with some sort of regularity, because I think you kind of almost need to check in with yourself about what you're doing, about where your life is going, about this next stage, because we're all frequently in that next stage, whatever that stage is. So is this what you want it to look like? Are you content? Are you doing the things that you want to do? If you're not, can you?
Yes.
And how can you get there? So I think it's in a lot of ways a really unique opportunity that you afford people,
Yes.
being a counselor. And I think from what it sounds like, I can see why you're so successful in doing it in the way that you're doing it. It's not very often, I don't think, that you get a college counselor like yourself or an admissions counselor to admit that, hey, maybe it's not for everybody, but you want to truly look and find out about the individual. So I appreciate that candor and that honesty from you just in general. And where can people find out more about you, Gina, and maybe connect with you if that's something that they aspire to do?
Joe, can I just interject one
thing? Yeah.
If there
absolutely.
are people, parents that are hearing the conversation, which I think there might be even like high schools and students listening in, I think that the one thing I would want to say is it is true that we should always be reflective, and reflective exercises make great essays, by the way, but don't feel pressured to figure it all out at once. Like, just do the reflection exercises right where you're at, not like, oh my goodness, if I don't figure out my major, Mrs. Lee, my life is over. We don't want to go there. Like a 9th and 10th grader or 11th and 12th grader, what are the things that keep you up at night? What are the concerns that you have in life? How can you be a part of it? Or what am I good at right now as a 9th grader, as a 10th grader? Where do I want to go? Like, don't go to like, what do I want to be when I grow up? That level, going that far, will create so much anxiety. And you and I know, Joe, I changed my major at least 3 times in college.
That's part of the process. It should allow for differences to come out within you, right? And same when we're adults. That's okay.
Yes. So I want students to feel that, like, take a deep breath and realize that what I'm suggesting, what Joe and I are suggesting about doing more reflection exercises, is to do it where you're at. Like, don't go so far where it's causing you anxiety, but just to pause and ask yourself those questions. What's my goal? Am I happy where I am? How can I use my strengths to go to the next area of curiosity? And so going back to your last question, Joe, people can reach me at www.ginablee.com. ginablee.com.
Gina, I really appreciate you being here with us and sharing all this. And again, I appreciate your honesty and your candor about how students should approach this in general. Once again, I see why folks would gravitate towards you as a counselor and as a mentor and as a coach. So thank you for sharing that with them, and thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you so much, Joe. I really appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation with you, an enlightening conversation with you.
And now the Middle Tree Minute.
This is Kristen Hernandez, Middle Tree's executive assistant. When students sit down to study, random thoughts tend to pop up, and that's completely normal. Teach your student to keep a small parking lot list nearby. Whenever a distracting thought comes up, like, I need to text my friend, or I forgot to ask about practice, they write it down and come back to it later. This reassures the brain that nothing is being forgotten, just postponed. It's a simple strategy that dramatically improves focus. And that's the Middle Tree Minute.
And now a quick look into Dr. Atman's book, A Philosophical War. Joe, last time we talked about a philosophical war, we talked about what is there and why it is there. Well, what's the importance of why a thing actually...
It's kind of one of those asinine philosophical questions that people who don't love or don't look too deeply into philosophy would brush off, and yet that distinction is so critically important. And we had talked kind of previously about giving primacy to certain things in the way that we think. I think the example that we used was we frequently give primacy to physical world. Something happens within the physical world, and that heavily influences our consciousness and the way in which we digest things. And we talked about what it might look like if we actually gave primacy to those things that happen within more of a conscious sphere. And we'll talk more about the relationship between physical nature and consciousness itself going on. But again, we're kind of attuned, being biological, physical entities, to sort of give primacy to this physical nature and reality that we all inhabit. But it's a similar thing when we bring up the question of quote unquote how versus quote unquote why. How a thing happens is this very mechanistic sort of viewpoint. If this happens, then that happens. If we put A and B together, then we naturally get C. That's a very, very useful and pragmatic way of unpacking, dissecting, dealing with the world as it is. It's an extraordinarily useful tool for advancing in this physical, again, realm that we inhabit. But our question is, why is the thing? It's really one of the major questions of philosophy itself and thought in general. Kind of like I said at the start of this, it's not something that people who don't engage with and interact with things in a philosophical nature, it's not generally something that people tend to focus on or look at. And that's fine, totally fine. Yet at the same time, that why of a thing, of anything, why a thing occurs is probably the root of all phenomena itself. Every action, physical, metaphysical, otherwise, has to have this question of why that thing is examined more deeply in order to even understand that how a thing actually unfolds.
Thank you for listening to Educate Everyone with Dr. Joseph Atman and Tammy Trujillo. Join us each week as we explore the inner workings of our own minds and the educational system which builds and supports it. Also, check out our website at middletree.org to see what opportunities Middletree's programs can offer you or your student. And join us on social media. If you have any questions you'd like Dr. Atman to answer, please leave them on a post or send us a message, and you may hear them answered on the next episode of Educate Everyone. Until then, thanks for tuning in.